Good morning, everyone, and welcome to History Matters, and so does coffee. I am beaming into you from a hotel in Kalamazoo. Oh, no, I'm in Grand Rapids. I spoke in Kalamazoo yesterday. I am in Grand Rapids today. So this is my lovely hotel room from Grand Rapids. And I have been speaking about democracy. I'm going to talk about this in a moment when I explain why I'm here and what I saw and why it matters. But before I do that, I turn to my wonderful partner in crime, Annie, who is going to explain the rules of the game.
Well, good morning, everybody. And I am coming to you from a hotel in Tempe, Arizona. I'm here for the National Council for Geography Ed conference. So this is how it works. If you're new today, you picked a great day to join us. But Joanne's going to talk for about 30 minutes about today's topic. Feel free to engage in the chat. We've already got lots of our regular friends and new friends, hopefully, with us. In about 30 minutes, I'll be back and we'll take your questions about today's topic. Those go down below in the Q&A. I'll see you in a little bit.
And I will say what I say all the time, every week. If you are joining us here for the first time, and there might be some Michigan folk joining us here for the first time, please say so in chat, and you will get a robust welcome from the History Matters community. And see, already I was told twice. I think this is our 283rd episode, but I've been shown it twice within the last 5 minutes and already forgot. But I think 283. But if you're here for the first time or one of the first times, please tell us because folks here will welcome you because as I'm going to be talking about probably later in my comments, the fact that we're here regularly and we're a community matters. Okay, so let me talk to you a little bit about why I'm here and what I saw and why it matters. There's an organization called Democracy First. And what they are doing and have been doing and are going to do right up until the election is getting historians and constitutional scholars and a variety of different people who have content and expertise in something that's related to politics or history, who are people who, because we have content, people want to come and hear what we have to say. We're not spinning. And they have been having these conversations with so-and-so, or big events, not lectures, actually, they're all conversations of one kind or another, all over the place, but mostly in swing states. And in swing states and in not major cities, but actually places where it's less likely that people are going to be meandering in and out and speaking about these kinds of topics, places where it's probably harder to get insight or to have a group conversation about democracy, particularly. So, that's what I'm here doing. And I'm going to actually be doing this 2 more times in the next 2 weeks because they're wonderful and I'm bonkers. But what's wonderful about this, it's great because you're out with real people. And that's part of what I'm going to talk about is why it matters to actually, or why it has mattered to me to be out in the world with people who are actually in the moment reacting to this particular election. It matters. I will, a couple of things. So number one, actually, I'll come back to this. I was going to say it's bipartisan. It is bipartisan. I'll come back to that momentarily. I do want to say, and I know someone can put it in chat, the first event that I did was in Grand Rapids on Wednesday night, and that was live streamed and that was recorded, and I believe that that has been posted. So if you want to see that, I'm sure someone can find the link and put it in chat, but it's up there. And I will eventually probably put it on my Instagram page and on my YouTube page. And I feel so high tech. Anyway, I will make it available too, but it's out there. And just before we started, Annie said that that event was kind of like a History Matters episode on steroids because there was a big audience and we talked about some of the things that we do regularly talk about here. Government, particularly what democracy is, what history can tell us about this moment, and a number of other themes. And I'm sure I mentioned both nights contingency. And I don't know, again, I don't know who here is new or not, but anyone who is not new knows that I find a way to mention contingency in almost everything I do. And I'm talking about it a lot these days. So at any rate, you can see one of the two events. And I salute this organization because what a great thing, right? You can look them up online. You can see the bipartisan support that they have from people on both sides of the aisle who just want to get word out about what democracy actually is and how our system, generally speaking, is supposed to run, right? And what history can tell us about this moment. It's a wonderful thing, and it's a small group of people doing an amazing number of events with all kinds of people. So anyway, if one meanders to a place near you, I highly recommend it. Okay, so now let me get to the point of what I want to talk about this morning, and that is hope, right? The idea of hope. Um, I have been certainly seeing a lot in whatever I'm putting up on whatever social media platform I'm on, in any way in which I've been in touch with people, a lot of people who are really, really, really hungry for reassurance of some kind. And I understand that because these next few weeks particularly are scary because we don't know what's going to happen because it's a moment of extreme contingency where we really don't know what's going to happen. And regardless of how the election goes, it's likely that former President Trump and some of his people are going to claim that they won regardless. They're sort of setting that up, and then that becomes scary on a whole bunch of other levels. So I understand why there's fear. Moments of extreme contingency are not calm moments. And this is a moment like some of the moments that I've studied as a historian, just not a moment that I thought I would quite live through in this way, particularly being kind of in the middle of it. But at any rate, I understand people being afraid. I understand people being fearful. I understand people being, I understand all of these emotions because I often share them with you. But my being here, I didn't come here to make myself feel good, right? I came here because I've been sort of desperately wanting to do something in this moment that would do good, that would use my skill set. And this fits that bill, and I feel like I'm doing good. And lo and behold, my experience of doing this did give me hope and did teach me things. And that's what I want to share with you this morning. So a couple of things here that I want to mention. First of all, um, some of the people who came to these events knew who I was. Many people had no idea who I was and had not heard of my book before. And the fact that they came is a thing, right? It matters. There were two full audiences of people who came, and all they were told is it was going to be a conversation about democracy with a historian. That's it. And people came to take part in that, to be in the audience, to see what was going to be said. The people in these rooms did not all agree with each other, did not all agree with me, and I was not preaching, the Democratic Party. I was talking about history and politics, but it was apparent, and I'm going to come back to this in a moment, that some of these people don't agree with me, which is fine, and actually even better because they were there in the audience wanting to hear what I had to say. They might not even know that they did or didn't agree with me, actually, since I wasn't preaching politics. But the fact of the matter is, it was a group of people, two large groups of people with different political views gathered together in a room to hear what someone had to say at this extreme political moment. That all by itself, I found amazingly encouraging. And as I was speaking, on both occasions, right? I'm looking out at the audience, I'm seeing people's faces, and I could see them, thinking. I could see some people who were unsure. I could see some people sort of weighing it. I could see people nodding. I could see people gradually kind of understanding where I was coming from. I could see the responses in these large groups of people. And it was, I said this both nights. Anyone in that room at that moment who came there to hear and engage in a conversation and questions about democracy, they have made themselves into a community. They are there with the same mission on the same quest to get the same kinds of information. That's a we. That's a community. And so what I saw was two big groups of people in that sense in common cause in a room at a really important moment with off the chart stakes as to where we are and what we face. And they were there in that room on a Wednesday night and a Thursday night, just wanting to be there for that. That's encouraging. And it's not as though I have ever assumed that me sitting in whatever room I'm in and the wonderful community that gathers here every week are the only people engaged in this conversation. But to be out in the world and see just a random group of people who really are hungry for information and are really processing. And I'll come to that in a moment because I can tell that there are some people really processing things. Think about that, right? That's what democracy, it's one of the things that democracy is about, is that you get to weigh possibilities, weigh ideas, think about options, and make a choice as to what you're going to support and vote accordingly. That's democracy. And if there's a room of however many people there were in these two rooms engaging in that, maybe they know what they want to do, but maybe they really don't. And if they're collecting information so they can decide what they want and vote, that literally is democracy in action. I found that just that simple fact alone really encouraged hope because it's people engaged in our democratic process right in front of me. That matters. It really matters. And it matters not just because it's here with me, it's happening again and again and again and again in different cities, again, because of Democracy First, this organization. It's happening all over the place in rooms of people in swing states, particularly in smaller cities and towns that are less likely to have lots of information being thrown at them, are just coming together to engage in these conversations. That's a wonderful thing. And the fact that this small group of people decided that they could do that and have carried it out, again, not only is it in and of itself invaluable, but that's democracy, folks. Now, to come to the point I've referenced a few times, that people in these audiences don't all agree. I couldn't necessarily read that on their faces. There were some people who either asked questions in the audience during the event, but more telling at the end. So everyone who came to these events got a free book. And then they all stayed to get the book signed. And so I did a book signing. And at that moment, people got to ask me things face to face that they didn't ask in the audience. That wasn't necessarily the plan, but it was what happened, particularly last night. So last night, a gentleman had the book, had me sign the book. And I have to say, there was nothing but respect and politeness. And Michigan might be the nicest state. When I got off the plane at the Grand Rapids airport, and it was like quiet and nice, and everyone was friendly, I was like, I'm not in New York anymore. It's different. People smile at you. And I love New York, but Michigan is like, so these audiences were like polite, respectful people. But some of the questions that I was asked when I was signing people's books, sort of drove home for me the fact that there are people here who really are deciding what they think. There was a very sweet gentleman who last night came up to me and asked if the Constitution says that communism is unconstitutional. Um, and said, I haven't read the Constitution and I want to know. Does it talk about economic systems? Does it say that communism is unconstitutional? That's a valid question, right? And if you don't know, that's a question you might want to know. I talked about what the Constitution to him did. I said it's about the structure of the government more than anything else. It's not about our economic system. Our economic system is for us to figure out. That's politics, and that's not really structure. But so there was someone who was in the audience just informing himself, had a point of view, clearly a strong point of view, was very respectful in what he asked and really wanted the information. Come on, folks, like that. I find that highly encouraging. I mean, look at that. That's what we should be able to do all the time, all of us everywhere. I don't understand this. Explain this thing to me so that I can think about it better. I found that highly encouraging. And again, that simple exchange really gave me hope. And another thing that gave me hope, and this is important, this actually, one of the nights I talked about realizing that what I was engaging in was close to the kind of history that I do as a historian, right? What I like to do is get on the ground with my historical subjects and try to experience through their eyes as best I can how they're understanding their world so that I can understand their reactions and their choices and their politics and why things proceed the way they proceed. And I mentioned, the ultimate mind game in writing my most recent book was I'm going to pretend that I don't know that the Civil War is coming because they didn't. And so I have to try and understand how they understand their times, not knowing what's down the pike, right? That's important. And what I was experiencing here was getting down on the ground level with just real people, just like me, seeing the reality of politics. I wasn't being bombarded with polls. I wasn't being fed spin. There were not people lying at me. It was just people. It was just normal people gathered together, engaging in politics by engaging in this conversation. That's the real stuff, right? And we're so bombarded these days and will be in coming weeks with all kinds of hoopla and craziness and claims and lying and counter lying and just the bonkers stuff that's going on. Um, to be with just normal people engaging in a conversation is a reminder that what's going on now is about us, right? It's about us. It's about we the people, right? We are the ones who matter. And being out here in the real world with people is a reminder that that's really the fact. And stripping away everything that is being thrown at us or not thrown at us and perhaps should be in the media, that's powerful. And that's one of the things I really wanted to share with you is that there are people who care really profoundly, whatever their politics are. And I find that compelling and I find that reassuring. What really resonated in both rooms on both nights was the larger point that I'm getting at here, which is that we are a we. We the people. And I've said it many, many, many times before, that, one of the things that's distinctive about our government was created in a world of monarchies. And what was different deliberately about this government was to a greater degree than in a monarchy, it was grounded on the people, on public opinion. Public opinion was supposed to be the source of power. It was supposed to be, and has always supposed to have been, where the power of our government comes from. The people matter, we the people matter, public opinion matters. And as I've talked about before, particularly in the early years, the founding generation, they weren't, their idea of who the public was pretty distinctive. They had a very exclusive sense of who counted and who didn't. Even that said, they weren't sure how to find that public or how to get what they thought. They just knew it was important and they were trying to figure out how that worked. We, the people, still, we may forget this because I think this is a moment of such powerful emotion in which we're all in some way processing what we're thinking and what we're feeling and what others are doing and what we're doing. I think it's very easy to feel isolated in this moment. And so I think that the simple reminder that it's us as a group that this is all grounded on, that community matters, that we the people matter in the end. We really do. It's, there's going to be lots of manipulation and various things happening at various levels. And I'm going to, in a moment, sort of mention some of the things I think that we can not focus on that are working against us being in the moment and being realistic in the fact that there is no decided outcome. But before I get to that, I do want to say that really never forget that we, the people, are what matters. We know that that's true because politicians generally are so desperate to get to us, right? That should also be a reminder of how important we are. If, it's our votes, it's us or nothing. And I think we forget that because campaigns are huge, and issues are huge, and we feel like one little voice amidst all of this. And the fact of the matter is, when the American people come together to do something in a group, joined, there's a power to that. And again, that's democracy. Now, A few more things I wanted to say about this moment. So, and I will add, Heather Cox Richardson and I finally managed to come together yesterday and do an Instagram live conversation, which will be on her Facebook page and is on both of our Instagram pages, I believe, certainly on my Instagram page. Um, and um, and she had actual Wi-Fi, so this was very exciting. She has a new phone, which is good, but she had Wi-Fi. So we could, she's in a hotel and so we could actually do this in a way we can't. And I will add, we're going to do it again this coming Saturday afternoon. I don't know what time yet, but she's going to be in another hotel, so she'll have Wi-Fi. Um, but what we talked about was the fact that so many people are anxious and scared and want reassurance. And we wanted to come together and talk about what we were feeling and what we were thinking in this moment, because there are so many of us who need to touch base, who need to come together to process this moment with other people and not in isolation. So some of what we talked about, I'm going to mention here. Um, and one of the things that is not surprising and certainly not distinctive to us, but it's important because now we're seeing polling, a million bazillion polls being thrown at us. Don't rely on polls, people. Really don't. I'm not saying discount them entirely, but I am saying don't assume that they're the absolute truth. Just don't. We in recent history, in not so recent history, again and again and again, we have seen polls pronouncing winners and losers, and then magically, that's not what happens during the election. So I encourage you, particularly given that really on the right now, there are people, endless numbers of polls spouting that, it's very obvious that former President Trump is going to win. It's a landslide, whatever it is that they're saying. Look at the polls, consider the polls. Don't judge what you should be doing by the polls. Because at this point, they're a campaign. They're not objective polls very often for the most part. So I encourage you, as we've said many times here on History Matters, pause, particularly in the next 2 to 3 weeks, pause when you have a strong response to something. Pause when there's a poll and you think, oh no, we're going down. Like pause and consider that if you have a strong emotional response to something, does someone want me to feel that way? Is this about getting me to feel a certain way, to think a certain thing that's going to help them or hurt someone else? Is this actually objective information, or is someone trying to get to me and particularly get to my emotions? Because at this moment where the stakes are so high, one of the most powerful ways in which someone politically can grab you is by touching on fear or hate or need or want, these primal feelings. If you are feeling a strong feeling at some piece of information or some appeal or some whatever, pause and think about the dynamics of that moment. Where's the information coming from? What might these people want you to think? Is what you're seeing a presentation of information in a sense of objectivity, or is it really just a ploy to get you to have the right, meaning convenient and useful response in a given moment? It's going to be really hard to remember that because the stakes are very high in this election. There is no denying that. Off the charts high. But for that very reason, because they matter, don't just buy the polls. Don't just buy the spin. Think about what's being thrown at you before you swallow it. Think about it. Also, don't buy the gaslighting. What's been very interesting to see, again, Heather and I talked about this yesterday. Right now, the feeling coming from the Trump campaign, what we're seeing versus what it feels like are two different things. So what we're seeing is, all kinds of claims about confidence and polls and they're ahead and Harris is drooping and all of the claims that are being made. But some of the claims that are being made are so off the charts, as I said yesterday, bonkers, that what it says to me is fear. For example, some of the recent events where former President Trump has had some real problems communicating, let me put it that way. We've seen members of his team immediately come out and say, maybe it was Stephen Miller, who said that was the best, most important political speech given by a politician in American history. Okay, if you're making that claim, and you know that people watched what happened, and you know that people know that that's not the case, but you're making that claim in all seriousness, that's fear. That's not strength. And that's important to remember, right? If the claims feel off the charts and they make no sense to you, like that one, the best political speech, really? Or that, think about what that says about his grasp of the economy. And we can watch these events, we can see the comments, we know that that's not true. If they're making claims that are that obviously false, that are just not just lies, but big bazooka lies, right? Lies that how people can believe them is a different question. But at any rate, if they're on that level of absolute lies that not even a friendly person might be able to believe, that's fear. That's not strength. And that's important to remember because, again, the goal here is to inspire people to either think, well, they're winning, so maybe I shouldn't bother. They're winning, so I should be on their side. They're winning, so my vote doesn't matter. Whatever the goal is, don't fall for the gaslighting and don't fall for the lying. And the best way to do that is to pause and think about what you're being fed. Think about where it comes from and think about what the goal is. The simple fact is, should we be concerned? Yes. Should we be scared on a certain level? That's very logical. The stakes of this election, it is not an exaggeration to say that democracy is on the ballot. It's also not an exaggeration to say that fascism is on the ballot, because they are. And I've said this in one or another way before. This is our moment, folks. This, I think, is going to be our moment in our lifetime to do something politically that matters profoundly. It matters. Don't stand by and think you don't matter. Don't assume that there's nothing you can do. This is a moment for us to stand up and for us to speak out and for us to call things out and for us to come together and speak for and work for and push for what we value. Democracy. This is bigger than a candidate. This is bigger than the normal things that happen in a political campaign or an election. This literally is about democracy versus fascism. Not an exaggeration at this point, given the rhetoric coming from Donald Trump and some of his people. This is democracy versus fascism. I can't believe I'm actually saying that bluntly, but it is. So this is our moment to make a difference. I say that particularly as a post-menopausal bird lady, as a woman who, among so many other women, is being discounted in so many ways. For us particularly, it's a moment for women to stand up and speak out for us and for younger women and future women, and for their rights, and for their ability to speak for themselves and make decisions for themselves. In so many ways, people, this is our moment. And I want us all to realize that, not to be driven by fear, but to be driven by urgency and hope that we can make a difference. It is an urgent moment. But it is a moment where democracy really matters, and democracy is us. I can't even communicate to you how, to the depth of my heart and soul, I believe in us. I do. I believe in we the people. I believe in the fact that the American people can come together and make good choices. And I know that's not true for all of us. That's democracy. That's not a new phenomenon, but I believe in us and I believe in the American experiment and I believe in democracy and I believe we have never in our lifetime seen democracy challenged in this way. We've taken it for granted. I certainly have for most of my life until this moment. And I wouldn't say that we should ask for this kind of moment, but speaking objectively, it is not a bad thing to be forced to reckon with the fact that democracy is fragile and valuable, and we need to protect it. That's where we are. We understand that in a different way. For everyone that says, I'm scared, they're scared because the thing they love and value, democracy, is endangered. That's what the fear is about, right? That democracy is endangered. That is also, the fear is a sign of love of democracy. And in that sense, it's a sign of something good. So, this is a scary moment. And I think I'm falling out of this chair because it like leans backwards and it keeps sliding me out of the picture. Okay, let me move myself again here. So I'm going to be doing, I think, more. Heather and I are going to be doing more events in which we're sort of talking about the moment that we're in and how to be in it and process it and think about it. I'm going to be doing that too, probably on my YouTube page, posting things up because I feel like, and both Heather and I mentioned this to each other yesterday when we were talking. People, we both are feeling from people such a need to touch base with other people and feel reinforced because fear is isolating. Fear just puts us in a zone of, I can't do anything, bad things are happening. That's not helpful. But being with other people and processing the moment and acknowledging where we are and realizing the power of coming together, of acknowledging the danger that we're in, and realizing the degree to which the power that we have as people when we come together and exchange ideas and then act on those ideas through our political system, through elections. And if elections get messed with, then we use the system to protest elections being messed with. There's a system in place. Both nights I talked about, I guess you won't be surprised, regular people who come here all the time, the election of 1800 as an example of a past election that was off the charts, off the rails, bad things happened. And the assumption was, and Jefferson said after it was all done, when asked, what would you have done if it had gotten really violent? And he said, well, in the end, we'd have another convention, we'd fix up what needed to be fixed up so it might not happen again, and then we would just keep going. Our system, our political process, that's what holds us together. That's what needs to be preserved. That's what creates democracy. And I think most of us understand that, and I think most of us value that. And so I encourage you to realize that some of the fear is born of love. It is. Some of that fear is born of our love for our country, for democracy, for what we want America to be, even if it hasn't gotten there yet. As I've said before, democracy is not an end point, it's a process. We have work to do in that process. But if you're scared, it means you love what we can be. It means you love democracy. It means you love this nation. And that is a good thing. So in this moment, remember that there was a lot of of course, I mentioned that all over the place in these talks. We really resonated with people because we make a difference when we realize that we're all in this together. Okay, I'm going to stop talking because I'm 4 minutes over. Now, I don't have a mug, but I do have something that I think is highly symbolic of this moment. It's Mug on the Road. It's here we are, like running around doing things for democracy. So it's the mug of the week. That's the best I could do. It doesn't even say anything on it, actually, but it's compostable. So anyway, it's oh, that's great, David. It's the contingency mug. We cannot hear you, Addie.
Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay. It is the contingency mug.
Okay.
That's wonderful.
The next time I go to a coffee shop and they ask what name, I'm going to say my name is Contingency. So they write it on the paper mug and then they have to yell out, Contingency, Contingency. That would be so fun. Okay. We have a really like live chat going on, and it's episode 238. Is that correct, Carolee? Not 83, it's 38.
Oh, I'm sorry,
But that's okay.
238.
I'm just
I
trying
told
to,
you I forgot it. I
I
told you
know
I
I'm
forgot.
terrible with numbers. You know, I reverse them too all the time. All
Yeah.
right. Let's look at the Q&A. Okay. Lenora, if you are new, Lenora, I don't remember you asking a question before. It says, why do you think Kamala Harris chose not to appear in person at the Al Smith dinner?
Oh, I actually don't know how to answer that. In part because I've only seen snippets about that dinner and about what they did. And so I'm just not informed enough. I wish I were. But obviously, sort of out on the road, I don't have my normal
Yeah,
ability to sort of sit and watch everything.
right.
So I don't know. I unfortunately can't answer that one.
Okay. Someone said she did submit a video in her
She
absence.
did. She did a video, didn't she, with Saturday Night Live character that was like funny and serious at the same time. Is that not right? Um,
I've been on the road, so I didn't see it yet. I'm going to have to
oh,
go
okay.
I get
Anyway,
home. I know.
um,
Somebody
yeah,
put the link into the video. I want to watch that later.
yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
also Lenora, that is my niece's first name. Lenora May, we call her Nora. Okay, our good friend Dave asks, was your answer at Calvin about republic versus democracy well received? It seems like lots of people get hung up on that. We talk about losing our democracy, and one retort is, we have a republic, not a democracy. So a democratic republic is right, but not powerfully helpful. Your thoughts?
Well, I was very glad someone asked it. So for those who don't know, there was someone in the audience who asked, for this whole thing that people say about are we not a democracy or a republic or not a democracy, we're a republic, we're a constitutional republic. What do you say? And I explained, our Constitution creates a democratic form of government. We're a democratic republic, and you can be both things at the same time. It's not one or the other. And I talked a little bit about how when this first became a controversy, I actually asked people. This was before um, social media and particularly Twitter went to a place where you could not have this conversation. But at that point, that early point, I asked someone like, why are you so against this being democracy? Like, what is the problem? Why does it have to be a republic? And he said, democracy is like uncivilized. It's like crazy. It's like he had, I don't know what he thought. That exchange way back was part of what got me to be on social media so much, because I realized he really didn't understand what democracy was. And I think that's true in a partisan way. I think there are a lot of people who think that by democracy, that somehow or other that is the same thing as Democratic Party, and that those things somehow go together. I think they think democracy is everybody getting everything they want all the time, that somehow or other it has to do with maybe even economics, right? That democracy equals communism and Marxism. I don't know, and I can't speak for everyone, but I think that people fundamentally don't necessarily know what democracy is, and that's where that sort of thing comes from. So we are a democratic republic. We are a democrat. You can have other kinds of republics that are not democratic, but you can be both things at the same time. That's like someone said to me yesterday, you can be a golden retriever and a dog at the same time. You can be both things. It's not like you have to be one or the other. So you know, we're a democratic republic. I don't know, if people are scared or nervous or don't like the idea of democracy as they understand it. I don't know if my saying we're a democratic republic is going to help. But that's my answer to that question.
Right. All right, Laura Niven. That's another new name to me. I'm not sure if you've been with us for before, but I don't remember having you in the Q&A before. Laura asks, how do you as a teacher, I love the question already. How do you as a teacher connect with young people and convince them of we the people and the importance of community and democracy? It seems like young voters are especially confused and remarkably undecided. And she put a thanks at the end because she's a teacher and she's polite.
Oh, thank you, fellow teacher. Um, I suppose in part what I do as a teacher, I talked about this at one of the events. I try to First of all the students read the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and we talk about them. But above and beyond that, I try to talk about the various things that they have the right to do, right? We talk, I mean, I'm talking about early America. So, um, in my classes, I'm actually not explicitly talking about modern politics at all, but I do talk about the right to protest. I do talk about the vital importance of a free press. I talk about their origins. I talk about, in history, sort of where they come from and how they were considered and how they've worked or not worked over time. But I talk about all of those things as being significant, and as now I talk about them as potentially being endangered and what happens when they're endangered. Why do people care so much about this stuff in the past? Is one way in which I think certainly as a teacher, I can get my students to think about what it means to not have those things. I'm lucky and I teach at a wonderful place, and these students are engaged. And I don't think they're disengaged. I don't think that they have decided they can't do anything or have any good. So in that sense, I'm lucky. I've always found actually Yale students are kind of politically aware and active in a way again, in all kinds of camps, but they are. So I suppose part of what I do is try to enforce that, historically speaking, the things that we value right now can't be taken for granted. They weren't when we started out. They were experimental. And again, a lot of the things that I just said in my comments, what we do is the essence of power in this government. So what they do matters. I also talk a little bit about how, historically speaking, when young people come together and act, that's really powerful. A lot of change has happened in American history, particularly in the 20th century, when young people come together and act out of a sense of um, urgency and immediacy, and with the power and the vigor and the belief of youth. That matters too. So telling young people that not only do they not have power, they have a special kind of power, I think that's useful too.
Yeah, I just put an article, a GIF link to the article from June that I sent you guys earlier. A good friend of named Shannon that Carolee and I hang out with teaches kids in Allentown, high school kids that are going to be first time voters. And they were very apathetic. And there's an amazing article in the Washington Post from June that talks about her trying to convince them that they matter and that their votes matter. So I hope people will read that, because that's who we need to reach. Okay, our good friend Gloria says, is not the left constant refrain of Trump is dangerous arousing fear?
Say that again.
Is not the left constant refrain of Trump is dangerous arousing fear?
Oh, so is the rhetoric from some on the left creating fear? Well, I suppose in some way you can say yes, but that's also a fact, right? Um, and as I said in my comments, I'm not saying don't be scared. I'm saying have hope and realize that we can make a difference. I think, someone asked me in the audience on the first night, I'm scared, what would you tell me? And that was, first of all, that was hard, because what I wanted as a human being to be able to say was, here's how to feel better. And all I could say was, and I'll say it here, um, don't assume what's going to happen, right? So some of what's happening now, and it does relate to some of what I wrote about in my last book, excuse me, which is, you had like the Southerners protecting slavery, and part of the way in which they did that was they used threats and violence and sort of made it seem as though horrible, horrible things are going to happen if people stand up, and they wanted people to be scared so that they would sit down and shut up and not act. That was a big part of their political strategy. And that it's important to realize that some of what we're seeing now is intended to scare us, and that intended to silence us, and intended to get us to push ourselves aside. And we shouldn't assume what's going to happen next. We shouldn't assume that some of the threats and the what we're seeing that seems scary, don't surrender to it in advance. Don't assume it's an accurate reflection of what will happen. There are all kinds of possibilities. We really don't know what's going to happen. And yes, it makes sense for us to be scared. It doesn't make sense for us to give up. It doesn't make sense for us to say, that's too scary. I got to back out of this. That's what people want when they're saying things on the right to scare you. On the left, if they're saying, if Trump wins, we're in big trouble, I think that's a fact, but that's not intended to paralyze you. That's intended to motivate you. So, I don't think that fear and hope have to be mutually exclusive, I guess is part of what I would say. You could be anxious, fearful, and you can also understand that now is the moment to act and to step up to the challenge and to understand that we can do things. We can come together and do things. And I'm not just saying that as much as I really want us all to feel better, I'm not just saying that to make us feel better. I believe that. I do. History shows that. History shows that. American history shows that.
All right. Our good friend Rich Houston, who says it's glorious in Cape Cod this morning, he says, Joanne, could you share some themes from your Instagram conversation with Heather yesterday? So everybody's not on Instagram. He's just wondering if you could hit some of the highlights for us.
I did do some of them. Actually, in my comments, I did hit some.
Okay.
We talked about the sort of gaming, not in a sort of ha-ha fun gaming, but the gaming of polls and rhetoric and things happening with the Trump campaign. We talked about the fact that that actually is a sign of fear and not strength. So some of the things I talked about, actually, I pulled from there. You can find it on her Facebook page. You can find it on Instagram as well. And I'm going to post it on my YouTube page, which I think anyone can get to. I just have to remember how to do that, and I probably can't do that till later today when I get home. But I will do that. So it'll be available for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Our good friend Linda, who has been working really hard to help hurricane victims. I've been going back and forth with her the last week. So thank you, Linda, for that. Linda asked, would the average voter attend a talk on democracy, or would it be only highly informed voters who would be there? How did Democracy First find attendees for your talks? This concerns me because we need to reach the uninformed voters.
Right. Well, they did apparently, and I only know a little bit about this, they did all kinds of testing and market research in which they just brought random people into a room and showed them different kinds of things and saw what their response was. So, certainly there's a self-selecting group to some degree that's going to come to a talk like this on the one hand. On the other hand, the man who said, I've never read the Constitution, is communism in there as being unconstitutional. That's someone who is really in the moment, in the mix, and has questions and cares enough to be there at that event, but isn't necessarily, sort of profoundly informed in a deep textual kind of a way. And that's the kind of person that should be coming to these events. So I can't tell you how many people in the audience fall into one category or another. And it is true, if they're there on some level, they really care and are interested. But it sure felt to me that it was a spectrum of different kinds of people. And the group did a lot more, Democracy First did a lot more testing and research on how to get people interested and in, so that I don't think I don't know how they're advertising these things locally or anything like that. So I don't think it's like, show up for a conversation about democracy. I think whatever they're doing it in a way so that people understand it's a no stress, no pressure way to just sit in an audience and hear people talk. And some of these people, they had Doris Kearns Goodwin do a few of them. In some cases, it's very, very famous people. I think Heather is doing one in Pennsylvania, and I think I'm joining her. So, she's famous. Some people are very famous and people know them and they come because it's a famous person, but a lot of the people speaking here are not famous people. And it's just the fellow I talked to in the coffee shop yesterday said, I used to live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and there was stuff happening all the time. But now here in Kalamazoo, like, things like this don't happen very often. So if they come, then I'm just going to go. And that's kind of why we're doing these things in these different places that are not Detroit, Michigan.
Yeah. Doris Kearns Goodwin has a YA book for the teachers that are with us that just came out. It's a YA book of her young leadership book, and it looks at
Okay.
four presidents when they were young people and shows like how it shaped and informed them into becoming the leaders. And it's really good. So if anybody's looking for a good book for to explain all this to younger people, I would highly recommend that one.
I want to address something that I'm seeing in the comments, and that is the historical comparison between Trump and Hitler. And I want to talk about that because I also have talked about why I think the question, like, are we going to have a civil war, is not a good question to ask. It's an inaccurate question to ask. I think there are ways of using things like the word Hitler or the phrase civil war as a shorthand. And when you do that, it erases some of what's particular about the current moment. Now, it is very true that there's aspects of the rhetoric and the motive and the policy of what Trump is proposing that echoes much of what Hitler was promising, suggesting, and saying. Excuse me, but I think I'm losing my voice after the last 2 days. But I think um, that directly saying, Trump is Hitler, um, that erases the moment that we're in. That erases what's distinctive about this moment. That pulls us out of the moment. It's a shorthand, and it's kind of a lazy shorthand. Same thing for Civil War, right? We're going to have a civil war. Well, no, we're not. Civil war is a shorthand. What a civil war is when the nation divides in half or in pieces, right? And you have one team against another team. Whatever is coming down the road, I don't know what it is. None of us do. And if you say you do, you're lying. But it's not going to be a civil war as we understand a civil war. That's a catchphrase. And I don't think that's useful to use. And again, I said that at some point in the last 2 days. Apparently, there's someone who wrote Barbara Walter, not Walters, Walter, who wrote a book along these lines that talks about this very fact that talking about civil war is a historical comparison that not only makes no sense but does a disservice to the moment that we're in. So that's yeah. Okay, good, Gloria. I'm glad that's yeah. That gets us back to pause when you're responding to what people are saying. It's a great example of that, right? Hitler. It's like, well, do we want to say that? Is that a fact? I understand the comparison, and I understand the comparison in what Trump is proposing. Um, but particularly as history-minded people, we need to watch what people are saying and understand that sometimes shorthand is not good hand, right? Sometimes shorthand really is a disservice.
Yeah, Dr. Ayers has been getting a lot of Civil War comparison questions lately in the talks that we give, and he keeps saying the same thing you just said.
So here, Linda said Trump straight up last week said he wants to use the National Guard and or other military to target his opposition. Well, that's fascist, right? I mean, Hitler or no Hitler, that's fascism, authoritarianism. That you could say, but to say that's Hitler is to pull things out of historical context. So I'm not saying not to say that's authoritarian or that that's fascist for sure. And to say that you're going to turn the military on your opposition is so beyond the beyond that I don't even know what to say to you about that. So actually in that case, saying he's like Hitler erases the seriousness of what that is. Puts you in the mind of like, oh, yes, historically he's like Hitler. This is bad. No, this is a president who is threatening to turn the military on people who he doesn't like or who don't like him enough. I don't care if it's like Hitler or not like Hitler. Unacceptable. Unacceptable. That's how we should be reading that. Historical comparisons in this kind of a case are useful, but they don't capture where we are. The simple fact that he said that, and when given a chance to back away from it, doubled down on it, that's authoritarianism, that's fascism, that's a dictatorship. That is unacceptable. It should be unimaginable. And that's how we should respond to that.
Yeah. So Linda Shalish, who's with us quite often, so it's good to see you there, Linda, says, would you be willing to comment on what's going on in Virginia with Governor Youngkin's says EO ongoing purge of voter rolls within the 90 days when they're not supposed to. The Voting Act's right of 1993. She says in Waynesboro, Virginia, they're refusing to certify election results. They sued the state electoral board. Jennifer Lewis is going to countersue. It was in her local paper and several articles in the Washington Post. So there's other governors doing that. They're basically going through, and if someone made a like check the wrong box, but they've clearly, lived in the same house for 20 years and been voting consistently, he's using that if they're registered as Democrats to purge the rolls. So that's why I'm telling people to like check your registration on a weekly basis.
For sure. And yes, I mean, so there are going to be all kinds of ways, and there are already all kinds of ways in which people are messing with the system, with trying to prevent people from voting. Now,
Yeah.
all by itself, if someone is trying to make it hard to vote, they're usually not on the side of good, right? And that's a sign of how much your vote matters. But the thing about that is, and Heather and I did say this yesterday, unlike last time, we know this is coming, right? We know that there's going to be, that there are, and we already knew this is coming. And so it's not as though we're going to be stunned and surprised. Oh my gosh, that there are people who are already reckoning with how to deal with this. There are still systems in play. I saw a little while back, people were saying, but the everything's corrupt and nothing is working. No, I wouldn't say that that's true. I would say there is corruption. And there are some things that are not working as they should, in part because people really don't want them to work as they should. But that doesn't mean the systems are dead and that they're not functioning. It really doesn't. And so, yeah, these things are happening. They're wrong. In some cases, they're decidedly illegal, if not immoral, and improper, all the I words. But the fact of the matter is, we have systems in place that are made to reckon with them. This is not going to be easy, and it's not going to be brief, sadly. How this election is going to play out, and again, we have no idea. But don't lose faith in the fact that there are systems of the rule of law and government and process in play that still exist, and people who are still hanging with that simple fact that that is how we operate in this country. Don't take the loud um, threats and obvious, in some cases, illegality of what's happening by from some Trump supporters as a sign, again, that it's all over and that we can't win and that nothing is working. Part of what people have been doing for many, many, many years, again, mostly on the right, is trying to get us to lose faith in systems of government, in national institutions, right? To get us to back away and say, ooh, I don't trust, whatever, you name it. I don't trust elections. I don't trust any kind of national institution. I don't trust FEMA. I don't trust, you name it. People have been trying to erode faith in any kind of national institution, any part of our system of government. And a lot of our government, our system of government is held together by faith in the fact that that process works. If you're eroding faith in it, you are doing damage. And that's been a long-standing, semi-recent years project. So be sure when you're thinking about our system, don't assume that it's already eroded and not functioning. I wouldn't say that that's true. I would say that we've been encouraged to lose faith. We've been encouraged to assume that that is the case. And there are ways in which, as you just mentioned, Annie, things are obviously not working the way they're supposed to work. But I don't think that means, again, it's all over. I think that means we can see what's happening that's wrong. We can call it out. We can point it out. We can work with people who are trying to do something about it. We can encourage and support either political people who want to act on that. We can help the ACLU that is getting in on some of this. There are any number of ways in which there are still props that are up and working, and that we shouldn't forget that.
Yeah. Beth Lomnitzer has a good question. I think Carolee and I have some very definite opinions on this question, and the other teachers probably will too. She says, college students have to take some required courses as freshmen. How do you feel about having students be required to take a course as freshmen to understand how to weigh online information? I feel it should be required for elementary students and continued throughout their education, but a required college course might be a good start.
It's interesting. Um, I mean, I can't say like yes or no. I do think that generally speaking, students need to learn how to do that. And maybe a required course on, and I don't know if that's a course on being an American citizen or civic responsibility or um, you know, finding truth in our current, truth meaning parsing. How do you read things online and how do you evaluate them? Um, I don't know, but that's not a bad idea.
So media literacy does exist in most state standards. They call it, that's where it comes under media literacy. Sometimes it's embedded in the library standards, but kids aren't tested on, the library stuff. Sometimes it's embedded in English, but recently they're calling it data literacy, looking at polls and that kind of thing. And that's been added to math standards. So they're kind of sneaking it in the back door.
Interesting.
And we've been doing a lot with that because a lot of our maps are based on visualizing data. So it's in the K-12, Beth, but whether or not it's enforced because it's not tested. And of course, we know if it's not tested, sometimes it gets the short, end of the stick. So I think, I don't know how much of that's up. You're in the college part, but I know in K-12, we're working really hard and it's been hard the last 6 years, especially to do that.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. It's a really well, and so many people who are here are in one way or another educators or in the educational community. It's something to think about and talk about for sure.
And there's terrific online content already made that you can use. You don't have to reinvent the wheel for that. So if anybody's interested, you can email me and I can send you some good links. Um, and she was referencing the report that was recently on in Finland, how they've been doing this K-12 and they've been so successful. They're doing a lot of things right in Finland that we could take a lesson from. Okay, Dave asked, I've given money to Harris and Baldwin and Cook in Wisconsin, but I'm up against billionaires like Musk and here in Wisconsin, Alderman. And thanks to organizations like Citizens United, how do we get the money out of politics? So yeah, like us sending what we can afford as regular citizens is nothing to compare what Elon can do, right? So how do we fix that, he asks.
Well, I have the absolute answer to that. No. Do I think that has to be acted on? Yes. And I think that's something that should be, acted on in the near future, depending on where we are in the near future, for sure. The many ways in which people with a lot of money are steering, controlling, channeling information and power. Not that that's new, but when democracy is as endangered as it is, and that's the case, that just ups the risk and the danger to an extreme degree. So do we have to fix that? Yes. Do I have an absolute response for that right now? No, because who the heck knows where we're going to be in a month, 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah. And Gloria brings up a good point. There are billionaires on, the opposite political spectrum.
Right.
So.
But right. And I'm not even saying one way or another billionaires. I'm just saying billionaires should not be in control of our system.
All right, we're 3 minutes over, but we only have one question left. Do you want to try and knock it out?
Do the one question.
Okay.
Yes.
Deb says, she says, what do you think about the practice of reporters like Bob Woodward, Maggie Haberman, uncovering important information, but waiting a year or two to release it when their book comes out?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that.
Me either.
I am not, and that a year from now there's going to be suddenly all kinds of information that it sure would have been good to know now. Yeah, yeah, infuriating is the word. That's infuriating. If people have information that people don't know that is vital, that exposes how and why things are happening, and is direct evidence of corruption, they should communicate that information. And holding on to it as if they own it so that they can make bank off of it. Yeah, I don't appreciate that. I think it infuriates a lot of people. And sadly, so I think it discourages some people from wanting to buy those books, but not everybody. So they do make money off of that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think we've seen that a lot in semi-recent years. And I think that that's irresponsible. And I think now the one thing I will say is if you have that kind of information, knowing when to give it and who to give it to would be a challenge, right? I mean, because if you have that kind of information, it's going to change things when you share it. So certainly I would feel if I were in that position, a great responsibility to do the right thing at the right time in the right way so that I'm not using my knowledge to do something in a way that serves me. I don't know. But yeah, that is infuriating.
All right, we did it. We cleared the deck.
Did it, and that's good because I have to say I can't really do the after party today because I have to go to the airport.
Yeah.
But
We don't want you to miss your flight.
I know, I don't want to miss my flight. So let me explain what normally would happen now before we sign off, because there are probably still some people here who have not been here before. Normally at this point, what we would do is stop recording and have the after party in which we can talk about anything that we want to talk about, and we can be even freer and easier than we were during the discussion that we had a few moments ago. And I love the after party because then we just really get to be a community being a community. But unfortunately, yeah, I don't want to miss my flight, so I'm going to leave here, finish packing and rush off to go to the airport. And I'm sorry that I cannot stay for the after party because I actually love being able to hang out with
Love
this.
a good after party.
Yes, yes, I love the after party. So at any rate, I do have to tell, well, no, actually I won't tell you the ridiculous thing. Because I probably
Now
shouldn't.
you're gonna leave us hanging.
Okay, I will tell you the ridiculous thing. I can't believe I'm going to tell this story on myself. So knowing this was coming, exactly, Francesca. So knowing that this event was coming and knowing I'd be moving and knowing I'd have things in storage and in New Haven and all over the place, I had one special suitcase. It was my Michigan suitcase and had everything I needed for this trip. And I was so proud of myself for like thinking of that, right? Already my outfit packed in tissue paper so it wouldn't wrinkle. So before I went into New York the night before the flight so I could leave closer to the airport, not be going from New Haven to Newark. And I'm staying at a friend's house in New York. And I opened my suitcase to get my outfit ready for the next day. And I realized I was deciding what shoes to bring. I took out my clothes to put my shoes in the bottom of my suitcase and I never put my clothes back. So I open my suitcase and I go, oh.
But you had cute
Says,
shoes.
right, my friend says, what? And I say, I have no clothes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so one time I was going up to DC for 2 days, and Carolee and I have a friend, Mark, that brings 100 middle school kids to DC every year. I packed the suitcase. I was so tired. I left the suitcase in the driveway and drove all the way to DC, and I get to the hotel and I had no clothes.
Right. I had no clothes. I had shoes,
Yeah,
I had pajamas. I had an umbrella. I had
honey.
my makeup and toiletries and stuff. I
Oh my
had no clothes.
So what did you do?
So thank heaven, the friend who I was staying with is roughly the same size as me.
Okay, because you
We
looked
spent
adorable. You had a cute outfit on.
we spent an hour going through her entire wardrobe trying to put something together that looked
Oh my
okay on
gosh.
me, that didn't look like I was.
I thought it was yours. It looked like something you would wear. It was
Wait, and
super
the fact that we
cute.
got to that point, but the fact that I literally, after being so proud of my Michigan suitcase, that I left on this trip and had no clothes.
Was that her shirt you're wearing?
Everything was hurt. Oh no, this is mine. This is what I
Oh,
want to
okay.
explain.
Okay,
No,
okay.
no, but the whole outfit, it's all hers. So anyway, I told that story on myself because I
I
think that
love
that's
it.
hilarious.
That is a
Okay.
great story. All right, I'm saving the liver.
Oh
You have
yes, save the link. Gotta
travels.
save the chat. I have to
Yep,
travel.
yep.
And we can have maybe a normal time of it next week. But I'll communicate when I know what's happening next week. Thank you
Yep.
for the safe travels. Saturday at sometime in the afternoon, Heather and I are going to do another Insta chat. We just don't know what time. I hope the plane says poof when it takes off. I'll say poof when the plane takes off.
Oh, that's so funny.
Anyway, okay. Thank you guys all for coming and for putting up with me
Thanks,
in the hotel.
everybody. Thank
Um,
you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Annie. Thank you, NCHE. Thank you all for being here and engaging in the conversation of
And Michigan people, thank you for
and
coming.
Michigan people, man. Yay,
Come
Michigan.
next week, Michigan people. You're part of
Yes.
the community now.
Woo. Okay, everybody. See you in a week.
Bye.